Welcome to STO Tech Trek. I'm your host, Astro, my co-host over here, Aponte, and today we have a guest star, the Kinetic King himself, Oden Knight. Say hello, Oden Knight.
Hello, everybody.
Anyways, we're going to be talking about torpedoes, the changes, and yeah, all kinds of good stuff. So we have a nice little list here. Aponte, I'm going to let you kick it off.
Yeah, so first off, we're going to actually go over what some of the changes from Season 13 to now are. After that, we'll talk about some of the different styles of torpedo builds, side torp, regular damage, max one hits, and then kind of go over what what the details of those builds are. So Oden actually has a list here that he made up of some of the changes, and he's going to walk us through that, and we're going to go into some detail.
All right, folks. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me on your show here. Appreciate it. It's an honor. And as far as the major changes that are happening now with since Season 13, first off, for those who are side torp aficionados, the gravimetric photon torpedo, has been fixed to where not only the control aspect of it, but also the part gen portion of it is now properly working. So all your part gen builds and your control builds will affect the gravimetric rift proc from that gravimetric torpedo. As if that wasn't good enough, now every single target in the torp spread will have a guaranteed rift proc, which means if you're running torp spread 3, you have 5 eligible targets. Each one of those targets will have a rift spawn on that target. That is stupidly powerful for that torpedo.
Yeah, I mean, some of the numbers we've seen so far with, even on my straight science character running exotic build, the numbers that you're seeing out of gravimetric photon torpedo when you're running a high EPG build are really incredible. You look at some of the top CCA runs, and the record right now is with Asai, and he has over 200k out of the gravimetric rifts themselves. So that damage is really, really boosted by EPG in a big way.
It's also something, we'll get into a later on discussion with it, but why is it that some of the torps, like the gravimetric and the PEP, are allowed to behave that way, and other torps that used to behave that way don't? But again, that's a different discussion. That's probably will be coming up a little bit later on the show. All right. Next one on the list here as far as the changes or fixes. Quantum phase high yield now properly procs its drain on the main target. Whereas beforehand, it would not properly drain the main target's shields. It'll only drain any other target except for your main target you're actually hitting it with. That's a good quality of life improvement there, because everybody who wants to use a quantum phase, the big selling point of that torpedo is, hey, let's get rid of the shields of the target you're firing on. It wasn't doing that before. Now it is. Third one, Omega kinetic shearing. This was considered the biggest band-aid for torpedoes. Well, for better or worse, and I would tend to grudgingly agree with people like SOB and Snipey 47 Alpha, the trait was overpowered. It used to do 40% of your torpedo damage as a dot spread across 6 seconds. It's now been reduced to 10% of that torpedo damage. Now, for those who are confused by the tooltip, let's make sure we get this clear. When you fire a torpedo, all of your buffs that you apply to that torpedo prior to it hitting the shields will count towards Omega Kinetic Shearing's damage. So if it's going to hit for 150k prior to it impacting the shields, Omega Kinetic Shearing is calculating off of that 150k. Now, any debuffs won't count towards that damage, and any dots or anything that allows dots to dot damage to increase on the target won't count for Omega Kinetic Shearing, even though it's labeled as a dot. We're putting dot in quotation marks. Omega Kinetic Shearing is exempt from all dot mechanics.
Now, see, this is another one that when it happened, I was with you. I mean, I was kind of upset by it because Torpedoes was always kind of the redheaded stepchild there. This was something that did work very well, and we got great numbers out of. But it was like the one thing holding Torpedoes at that high-end level. But I do kind of have to agree with you now after looking at it, because there have been some things, some traits that have helped Torpedoes, some of the newer Torps that we'll talk about that are doing really good numbers. So, it's not that big of a deal. You still see OKS doing good numbers. It still is absolutely a must-run on a real Torp boat. So overall, it's not the worst thing. I'm definitely not as mad as I was when it first came out.
Yeah, and part of the thing with OKS, a little commentary on this here, it was a Band-Aid for a lot of the Torp mechanic issues. Like some mechanic issues that they either put out a small fix to or a slight nerf to other torpedoes. OKS was still the Band-Aid to say, all right, this is bugged or this is not working right or this hasn't been fixed yet, but you still have OKS making up for that slack. So you have things like, fixing gravimetric. That is, for side builds, great. If you're doing a pure kinetic boat, OKS loss, it will feel a little bit worse for you. The side builds actually got a buff overall when you're looking at the big picture. With a couple of the other traits that came in, like what you mentioned, reverberation being one of them, yes, there's more torpedo development as far as traits that are actually viable for pure torp or side torp boats, or even hybrid builds that aren't, buffing their torps exclusively. Reverberation will help. One other thing here as the other space reputation trait that you want to run if you're running a torp boat is torpedo pre-fire sequence. The damage buff for it is still there. It's a Cat 2 buff, which is like the must-have for torpedoes. You must have it. I believe, and this I'm just going from memory here, but I believe it is still the only Cat 2 exclusively torpedo buff in the game. Whereas you have a bunch of energy weapon Cat 2 buffs, but this is the only torpedo exclusive Cat 2 buff in the game. Now torpedo pre-fire sequence will increase the flight speed of targetable torpedoes, but you must have it on in order to see that increased flight speed. As of last testing, when it went live on holodeck, if you do not have torpedo pre-fire sequence on, you will not see the increased flight speed buff to targetable torpedoes. Now, I don't know whether it's the way that the patch notes were written that it was not stated clearly that you must have torpedo pre-fire sequence on in order to see that increase in travel time, but everything is baseline from season 12 to season 13. Without torpedo pre-fire sequence on, your targetable torpedoes are still traveling at the same speed. The season 12 torpedo pre-fire sequence travel time, the buff to its travel time is less than what it is, it's slower than what it is now. So there is a slight increase in travel time speed for targetable torpedoes, but only with torpedo pre-fire sequence on. Wow, that's a lot of tongue twisting right there.
Right. That's something that I'm still, I still am a believer that if we actually made the torpedoes flight speed a little bit faster, that, right now torpedoes are still where they're at. You know what I mean? They're still in that. For me, I'm still seeing probably the average DPS, maybe a little bit higher on the average, but I actually haven't seen the high, like the record kind of number I did beforehand. And beams are nowhere near what they were. But I really think if torpedo flight speed was adjusted just a little bit, just to give it that extra oomph to make sure torpedoes are actually landing before a lot of these other players with their beams are vaping everything, that you could actually see a pretty evenly matched kind of setup there between all of the different areas of damage.
Well, are you wanting to see it as quick as the Kelvin Timeline photon torpedo?
I was just about to mention that. The Kelvin Timeline Photon Torpedo is where I feel the baseline should be for all torpedo flight speed.
And now each one of those come with an actual built-in, what is it called? What the hell is that called? Yeah, yeah. What do we call that? A proc on the weapon? No, what the hell? A mod. Sorry, Jesus Christ. But yeah, so each one of the Kelvin Timeline torpedoes has the built-in mod of flight speed, correct?
No,
Yeah.
it's reload. It's
reload. Okay, sorry.
It just so happens that, and again, if one of the devs want to clarify on this one here, but based off what I saw from the last series of notes on there, where they slightly increased the flight speed of the Salvo torps, they fixed it on the FX side, not on that actual system side itself. So it's the actual FX or animation of the torp flying that was the actual contributor to its flight speed, not something that they said, okay, this will move at 1 kilometer every second. Now it'll move at 1.5 kilometers every second now. It's
Gotcha.
not a number that they're tweaking. It's just redoing the FX for it in order for it to move faster. At least that's what I got from it. And I could be wrong, or something could have changed. But from what I last read, I believe that's what it is there. And I'll need to triple check on that later on when I can actually find those patch notes. Now, the big one here, and this is what killed a lot of torpedo throughput. Now, this was my personal favorite here, where, and you'll see in a couple of my older videos, where you're able to queue up a torp spread or a high yield, and doing that will put the other torpedo ability on a 15-second shared cooldown. So you'll have a torp spread or a high yield for 30 seconds, and then the other one will be on a 15-second cooldown until it's available. You can then queue that up while still having the first one ready, and then fire off both with whatever torps are available. That's gone. That's no more. They got rid of that now. So if you have one or the other, that's it. You'll have to wait, fire that off, wait for the torpedoes to hit, and then you can activate the next ability.
See, now, in terms of where that affects it most is obviously PvE. That might hurt your actual first opening volley, as if you go into ISA, you wait for pets, you buff up. But that's about the only time within an STF like that where you're going to see that. But where this really hurts, obviously, this is a big kill to PvP players who were using torpedoes.
I can tell you that Alpha Strike move it's a game changer.
Yeah.
Because when you're going up against a tank, I want to be able to chamber a torpedo spread quantum phase, or now high yield since it's fixed.
Yep.
Then queue up a torp spread, be able to move into my target, pop all my buffs, unleash the high yield, because a high yield will take precedence over the torp spread no matter what the rank is. Unleash the high yield quantum phase to strip the shields, and then torp spread for neutronic or delphic to do some damage. And then if I get lucky with concentrate firepower or torpedo barrage, fire off a neutronic or delphic, shield should be gone, and then just chain fire whatever torps are there, target's dead.
Yeah.
Now you can't do that anymore. Even in PvE, though, here's a ramification for this. And I don't know if you saw this, Aponte, but when I'm trying to chamber up a torp spread while I have a high yield out in the air and concentrate firepower on the target, if that target gets hit by my torpedoes and I get a charge of concentrate firepower, it stops me from queuing up torp spread.
Yes, that is something so that's what's actually been kind of bothering me, though. Because, again, I understand the kind of lockout there that they don't want, but it drives me crazy because, yeah, torpedo barrage or concentrate firepower will proc, so a high yield will come out that I wasn't expecting, so there it is, and my spread is locked out, and I just buffed up beta and chemo and everything ready for either my spread or my high yield, and all of a sudden it's now just that Salvo 1 coming out with it. If that's not what I was actually going for, that could drive me crazy sometimes.
Yeah, it gets very annoying where you cannot activate a bridge officer ability that you should be able to.
Yeah.
I mean, and here's something else, though. I understand they want to kill the spike damage out of a spike damage weapon. I don't see why, but okay. But when you get to the point where you can't even operate that specific type of build properly anymore.
Yeah. Now, see, here's a question, because, I mean, I fly a few different styles of Torp builds, Psi-Torp, regular kinetic, a few different versions of that, but I haven't messed around too much with, like, let's say I'm just running with a straight Photon Torpedo crafted, just to mess around there with that. And if you have the spread proc, if Concentrate Firepower Torpedo Barrage puts up a high yield, and that torpedo procced for spread, do you lose that spread?
No, the spread is still behind the high yield.
Okay, so with the actual mod of spread, it will still sit back behind it, but it's not. But with the bridge officer abilities, you can't act. Yeah, okay,
Correct. Yeah,
that's good though. At least you're not losing the torpedo procking its spread. So
right. Now, what they've done here is, instead of, like, all right, for those who've used the spread mod before on Torps, if you have torpedo spread bridge officer ability and the spread proc active, you have a brief lockout where you cannot use any rank of torpedo spread bridge officer ability. So the spread, you fire your torps, you get a spread proc from the torp, then you will not be able to activate the bridge officer version of torpedo spread for a few seconds. This change here, though, treats all torpedo bridge officer abilities, all right, specifically torp spread and high yield, as if there is a proc of, that spread proc there, except you're locked out until you release that weapon. So you have high yield active. You cannot activate torp spread until high yield has been fired and is gone.
Gotcha. All right, yeah, let's try to just quick through the rest of them. And
all
then
right, the next big one here is Focus Frenzy. The haste portion of Focus Frenzy does not work on torps, but the damage buff does. And Aponte, I think you can speak more to the damage buff. I tested it on my Romulan. It looks decent, but you can speak more to this than I can.
Yeah, so this is one I was actually interested in, because right now in my Torp character, I'm actually not running an ultimate. So I was wondering if Focus Frenzy worked with it. So what we tested this yesterday, I had 4 energy weapons on, which is usually the absolute max I'm going to have on a Torp boat. That usually is a lot in itself. And I had 1 torpedo. The torpedo's base damage was 15,900. Somebody put Focus Frenzy on the target for me with Team Frenzy, obviously, so that I'm getting the buffs. And with nothing else boosting damage, I saw it go up to 17.4, and then again to 18.9. So it was giving me a good amount of damage increase, which obviously looked Cat 2 at that point, because when we were testing 25% Cat 1, it only went up by about 500. This added about 3,000 when I had, I guess, what would be 2 stacks of it, because it went up once by about 1,500, and then about a second later, I was able to get a second one. Now, we've tested a few times. Sometimes you only get the 1 to 1,700, and then other times it gets the one where it pops up to 18.9. So it's definitely a nice increase to damage, but we did not see anything with the haste. But you still need to have a few energy weapons there to actually get the damage increase. So
yeah, the proc itself won't do anything until, hey, just be nice, just do this. Now, one other thing here I wanted to discuss with you here, the Focus Frenzy. Well, actually, let me back up a little bit here. There was another change to probability manipulation, and this used to be the thing for torpedo boats, especially if you're going to pure kinetic side of the house.
Yeah.
Probability manipulation used to last for a full 30 seconds if you got the window portion of it. Window's gone now. No more extension on the damage itself. On the 50% crit hit chance, which is a bit of a nerf to the whole thing there. But all right, fine, we'll deal with that. But now it only lasts. Let me see if up here. Where the heck did I have it? Here it is. It only lasts for 15 seconds.
Yeah.
Period. And 15 seconds out of a 2-minute cooldown, a lot less than what it used to be with 30 seconds out of a 2-minute cooldown. And the cooldown starts the moment you activate it. It's not like you get the buff and then you have to wait two minutes after the buff expires.
Yeah.
So it was up frequently whenever you're using it. And it was very good for that when you had window. Window's gone now. So it's 15 seconds out of 2 minutes. You get 50% crit hit. Still good if you're going after max ones. But now you actually have to question, as a pure Torp build, or even Torp Psi, do you really want the Science Ultimate now, probability manipulation? Is that 50% locked-in crit hit good for you versus something like Focus Frenzy?
Yeah.
Would that be good for your build at that point?
Well, see, the thing becomes now, if you're running a full team, and this team is literally setting up the run where this person's going to Focus Frenzy left transformer, this guy's going to do right transformer, this guy's going to do gateway, this guy's going to do tactical cube, and they all have team frenzy. If you're in a run with a team like that, you're getting your 4 stacks of focused frenzy. You don't really need the 5th. So if you're a Torp guy and you have a team that's running like that, then probability manipulation's still probably your bet. That is a run that's not going to happen often, where you literally have 5 guys who have literally planned it to that level and all have focused frenzy. My thought is that a team that probably has 2 or 3 focused frenzies and are going to put them on the major targets is what would be better for me for what I'm running. Because to have the full team, then yeah, absolutely. You could run probability manipulation, get that benefit, and you're still getting the focus frenzy on the big targets. But, without control like that, if you're doing pugs and stuff, I prefer right now, because my ROM has good crit chance, I prefer focused frenzy. But I think it still needs to be... And one of the other reasons is, for all of the things I'd have to put in the science in my skill tree that will not help me or my build right now, I think they're better spent in tactical. And that's how I look at it.
I'm still running probability manipulation and, wanting to keep that because I still chase max 1 hits.
Yeah.
With that said, I still find a value out of it whenever I'm going after a really big target and I want to pop as many alphas as possible on that really big target. Probability manipulation allows me to stack crit D and roll the dice on spamming high yield ones via concentrate firepower.
Yeah.
Which, more on that later on, because there's some funny math with that stuff there. And funny math is the way Cryptic had done the numbers initially for torpedoes. So, while Focus Frenzy is great for one really massive target, like a boss fight on Corfez at the end, or really big, juicy target, with the frequency you're actually firing your torpedoes, unless that target time to live is really high, I don't see Focus Frenzy as being the end-all, be-all of it, unless, like what you're saying, in a coordinated team run, people are chaining it on big targets one after the other. And you as a Torp boat captain, whether side Torp, depending on your role, but whether you're side Torp focusing on big targets, pure kinetic, focusing on that one big target where you're dropping alphas, you want a target that is going to be alive long enough for all of your Torps to do all of the damage potential possible to that target.
Well, like at the end of HSC, the 2 pickles and the queen.
Right. Mm-hmm. At that point, I would say Focus Frenzy would be very good for those targets. Now, with that, though, Is there a point, Aponte, where you feel that you are splitting yourself between science and the tack tree in order to get one ultimate or the other? Because I'm running the probability manipulation, the science ultimate, and I still feel like I'm not losing anything on the tack side of it, because I'm going with full advanced shield penetration, advanced hull penetration. I have advanced weapon amplification. That's a crit severity one. I skipped out on the crit hit one there because I'm already running low crit hit out of my Fed tune, and I'm rolling the dice on high yield ones anyway. And I'm also making up for it with probability manipulation where it counts. So I could skip the crit hit completely there and be all right with it. Defensive maneuvering, don't need that. Advanced targeting expertise, unless you're PvPing, you don't need that. And then the ones I really care about, advanced projectile weapon training, that's already filled. And I have a point I could fluctuate between something in science, something in engineering, or fill out my advanced energy weapon training if I ever wanted to swap into a full beam build if I wanted to. So I don't feel like I'm losing anything in the tack side unless I want to really get my tack cooldowns going with tactical readiness. And I don't care for coordinated protocols because I'm not running hanger pets. Unless you're running in a hanger pet sort of style, you're not missing jack on there. If you're not running for maximum cooldowns, cooldown reduction on your attack abilities, you're not missing jack out of that there.
Well, see, first of all, the coordination protocols is actually a boost to also your team. I know it's a small, but that's Cat 2. The 3% base bonus damage for all teammates also. But I like to have everything in tactical except for advanced targeting and advanced defensive maneuvering. I even go for advanced energy weapon training because I look at it as the more anything on my boat is going to put out DPS-wise, the closer I am to getting that number that I want. So, but as far as science, I mean, for this guy, I purely run this boat, pure tactical kinetic damage. There is no EPG. There is no control. All right? I mean, this thing is purely concentrate firepower, my torpedoes, chemosite, structural integrity collapse. So, I don't need any of that. Now, do I think that one is that much better than the other? No. Do I think that they're both pretty damn close, to be honest? I mean, one's going to outperform one in a certain circumstance, but I mean, in the overall of looking at it, I think both are pretty damn even. Because that damage increase I saw was pretty nice, but obviously, for those max ones, having the control of all that crit D is nice. So I don't think it's actually a major thing. I would never tell anyone you have to go with one over the other. I think it's what you're more comfortable with, what you want to look at in terms of your skill tree, where you want those points to be.
Suited for the build that you're running with.
Yeah. And then obviously also, and we said that before, the difference between a Fed and a ROM. I mean, my Torp is on a ROM, and my crit chance is 33, and my crit severity is 210. I'm not going to get that kind of balance on a Fed, not even close. So, it could be different for the different, races. So that's also something to look at.
Yeah, right now, I'm sitting on a quantum build. So I'm just doing salvos here. I'm not chasing max ones with this build here. It's going to be faster, hard-hitting torps, doing a good balance between hard strikes, solid alpha, shield stripping, and decent damage. And I'm sitting here on a Fed tune without SROs at 18.2% crit hit, 163% crit D. That's with, precision on the space reputation trait, and advanced targeting systems also on the space reputation trait. So that's an extra 4% crit hit, 16% crit D. And I'm not stacking crit D here. I have a build where I would stack crit D, sacrificing crit hit, but that was at a time where probability manipulation lasted 30 seconds. And I hit native 198 crit D at like 9% crit hit. But I was popping max ones like a madman.
Yeah.
Resuming.
All right, so next thing we want to bring up here, and again, this comes down to style, but with this current, if you want to put meta in air quotes, weapon system synergy is starting to fall out of favor for a lot of different Torp builds out there. Now, for those who don't know what weapon system synergy is, you get that from the veteran ship, the T6 vet ships, and it uses energy weapons to build stacks. After you get 10 firing cycle stacks from your energy weapons, you get a Cat 1 25% torpedo damage boost and 50% shield pen for the duration of that buff. After that duration is gone, 10 seconds, then you have a 20-second lockout before you're able to build stacks up again. Now, for pure Torp boats, you know, where we're using energy weapons as a set bonus, you're going to see these stacks build up slowly. This is one of those things where they put out, where Cryptic put this out, trying to give hybrid builds a better fighting chance, where you have energy weapons plus a torpedo or 2 torpedoes on the ship, where you will be able to allow your torpedoes to do a little bit extra damage with this. For the pure Torp boats out there, or even some Torp side energy weapon builds there, you see this lining up every so often with self-modulating fire, to where you have a 4 to 6 second window of pure shield pen. So with self-modulating fire proccing and weapon system synergy proccing, you could have this window where you have 100% shield pen. What your torpedo is firing out to that target is going to do that damage. No shields interfering with it at all. Plus it gets a Cat 1 damage bonus on top of it. The problem with it now, though, is that the more torps you have on the ship, the less energy weapons you have, the slower those stacks build. It's only a Cat 1 damage boost. While the shield pen looks nice, the Cat 2 damage boost, like unconventional tactics, which you can get for free just by filling out strategist, that Cat 2 damage bonus is just too damn nice to pass. It's a lot. It is really a lot.
So I've been a weapon system synergy supporter for a very long time. For a while now, you've been telling me that, you know, it's good, but I don't use it. I don't see it. I don't see the activations enough to be worth it. And I've just refused to let go of this bad boy. I think a part of me, because there's not that many traits that are purely for those torpedoes. So when we were testing it, again, I was running, because my thought here was, okay, right now I'm running 4 energy weapons, which is a lot. Usually I'm running 2. So my thought was, with Focus Frenzy working the way it is, and me having those energy weapons, that, okay, now this is a good spot for this. And when I really started breaking it down to look at it, though, especially now, because I did question if it was Cat 1 or 2. You thought it was Cat 1. We didn't see it on the chart that people had made, so we wanted to test it. It's definitely Cat 1. I now look at it like as you said, with weapon system synergy, especially on a Torp boat, you're not firing a lot of energy weapons. You're probably going to have 20 to 25 seconds of every minute where this buff might be up, so you're getting the Cat 1 damage during that.
At best.
At best, absolutely. Or with tactical advantage, it's 15 seconds of every minute of guaranteed Cat 2 damage that you control when you want it. AKA, if a shield comes down because of reverberation, hit that bad boy, get those high. I mean, you control when that damage is coming out. That's really nice. I think, this is kind of like the supercharged weapons for torpedoes. Obviously, it existed first, but one of the things, and this drives me a little crazy, is because, you know, with supercharged weapons, it's just literally firing a torpedo that provides the stack of supercharged weapons. Now, where here you have to get up to 10 stacks with energy weapons. So, you know, I think they could have made it a little bit easier and faster to get to this buff. But yeah, I've come to the conclusion that I definitely think any other kind of Cat 2 there, for me, it's tactical advantage. But you know, there are other traits that are going to give you more of a damage increase that I think is more worth it at this point.
Yeah, and you touched upon a really good point here. Look at supercharged weapons, which is a Cat 1 damage boost for energy weapons, versus weapon system synergy, a Cat 1 damage boost for torpedoes. Look at the ease for getting supercharged weapons versus the ease for getting weapon system synergy procs.
It's almost a reverse. It literally, you fire one torpedo and you get it, and it stacks up to 3 times. Where with weapon system synergy, you need 10 stacks first, and you're only getting 1 shot of it. So
well, for 10 seconds, all your torpedoes from that point on get that benefit.
Yeah, but I mean, but that, you know, to this point with supercharged weapons, I mean, you can get the buff times 3. You know,
right?
So,
and there's no cooldown on it. There's no lockout period for it.
No, I mean, that's the thing, and you know, a lot of people are running, like, that's one thing you're seeing today. I don't refer to that as a torpedo build, but a lot of people, you're seeing a lot more torpedoes, just hybrid style, whether it's the Nausicaan Energy, or if people are running a drain boat with the quantum phase, you're seeing a lot of just at least single torpedoes on a build, and this trait is, you know, definitely a trait that's being used a lot more. So I think if weapon system synergy gave us a little more like this trait, I think it, you know, it would have been nice. But I've definitely finally moved on.
Yeah, I would do the same thing too. I would try and make room for it if it was much easier for it to proc.
Yeah,
you know, and along the same lines of ease of benefiting from it, the same thing within the command tree itself. You know, the tier 1 of command tree, great for torpedoes, but here's a caveat. You need to run a lot of energy weapons or convince somebody with a lot of energy weapons to run command either as a primary or secondary.
Yes. You know, now we're almost getting into, you know, this kind of support build, somebody helping you specifically to go for a torpedo record. There's a lot of things out there you can do. But yeah, for your actual build itself, if you're running command primary, I mean, I don't ever run a build. Well, usually, I mean, maybe sometimes just messing around. But my pure torpedo DPS build, it's never actually all torps. Because some of them won't even fire. You know what I mean? By the way it goes, sometimes some of them won't even fire with some of the refreshes from concentrate firepower and stuff if you have 5 forward weapons. So I always have a couple of energy weapons, but never enough to make these kind of things worthwhile.
Maybe it's one of the things that can be addressed, you know, when they actually get to the, hey, let's actually look at the torpedoes and the mechanics behind how torpedoes operate and do a complete revamp.
Yeah.
Which would be a perfect segue to this other portion here. Torpedo Salvo 1 doing some numbers, especially some higher numbers than Salvo 3. Now, for those who don't know, when we talk about salvos, we're talking about a torpedo where we activate a high yield on it. It's firing multiple of that type of torpedo out. Not like where we're seeing gravimetric or enhanced biomolecular or any of the bigger destructible torps types like tricobalt or the temporal disruption device, where you activate high yield and fire it, and it's only one big torpedo that comes out. So, Aponte, your experiences with this, what have you been seeing anecdotally and what you've been seeing in your logs here, where high yield 1 is just, even in the single individual hits out of those salvos, where high yield 1 is doing more damage per torp than high yield 3?
Yeah. So right now, if you look at any of my torpedo parses, you're going to see that the top DPS of all of those runs is always going to be a Salvo 1. Now, it could be a Salvo 1 for the Delphic or the Enhanced Biomole. A lot of times, both switch back and forth. They're both great torpedoes. But it's always going to be Salvo 1. Now, part of that is obviously running Torpedo Barrage and Concentrate Firepower. You're getting a lot of high-yield 1s, you know. But the fact that their damage is always to a point where one of them is usually over 30k for the run, and the other one is between 15 to 20. And then everything after that, Torch Spread 3, High Yield 3, they're all falling far shorter of that number. And, you know, that it's pretty crazy.
Now, let's just make it clear to our audience here, where we're not conflating the DPS with the actual individual damage of the torp and the performance of each torp within high yield 1 versus the performance of each torp within high yield 3 or even high yield 2 if somebody ever runs that. We understand that the DPS is just a function of frequency of attacks with the duration that you're actually making those attacks. So we'll take that out of the equation, take out the debuffs to the target out of the equation, and take out the buffs that are going into each shot out of the equation. We're looking at high yield 1 damage per torp by design is higher than a high yield 2 and a high yield 3. Now, back in the old days where nobody was able to hit past 150 to 200% crit D natively, you would see, okay, high yield 1, you know, each individual torp would do 20k each, like say on a quantum. They'll do 20k each, you know, fully buffed, where the single shot would do like 14k. High yield 1 will do 20k. High yield 2 will do 18k but fire 3 torps. And high yield 3 will do 16k per torp but fire 4 torps. So high yield 1 firing 2 torps to do 20k for each torp, so your total will be 40k. High yield 2 doing, what did I say, 18? 18, 36, and 48. So it'll do more than your high yield 1 for each individual torp. So for the combination of torps, they'll do more damage. Same thing with high yield 3. The problem we're running into this, though, is that when you get into ridiculous numbers on crit D, 200% on up, when you have 1 or 2 of those high yields critting in those torps, you see the lower ranks outperforming the higher ranks. And the only way the higher ranking of torps, high yield and torp spread, but high yields performing and giving you more damage than the lower ranks is if 3 or more of those torps crit. So you have situations where you're constantly firing both high yield 1s and high yield 3s, and you're seeing more of the 1 or 2 torp situation where those 2 torps are critting and the other 2 torps in your high yield 3 aren't, and you're getting more DPS and more raw damage out of high yield 1s than high yield 3s. There is a point of inflection where if you have enough crit D, if you crit with 1 torp or 2 torps out of whatever potential number of torps you're firing, high yield 1s would do more damage than your high yield 2 or high yield 3. Period. Now, Vel had done the numbers of this before, and we're going to put a link into the description below, where the probability of that happening ends up being about 1/3 of the time. But that brings us to another situation here. Baseline, excluding all buffs or debuffs against the target. Why would there ever be a situation where 1/3 of the time a lower rank ability may outperform a higher rank ability? Does that make sense to you?
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
And what's worse now, look at Delphic. Look at the Delphic Torpedo right now. Look at its high yield 1 numbers compared to high yield 2 and high yield 3.
I just literally hit high yield 1, looked over my Delphic, and I see 15,600 times 4. I just hit high yield 3, and I'm looking at 10,000 times 6. So essentially, you're seeing 60,000. I mean, a Salvo 1 is giving you 4 torps that are going to do 60,000, where with high yield 3, it's going to give you 6 torps equaling 60,000.
Now, the way that Delphic, and this may be the logic behind it. I'm not going to pretend I'm a mind reader on it, but looking at the torp, this may be the logic behind it here. Each one of those torps on a high yield is supposed to apply a debuff, and it's supposed to stack against the target.
Yes.
So
and it does.
And it does. And so the more of those torps that are actually hitting the target's hull and applying the debuff, each torp after the one preceding it will receive that debuff and then do a little bit more damage.
Yeah. So
right there, slightly more damage for each torp under a high yield 3 than a high yield 1. But does that make up for the damage difference between each individual torpedo that you see between high yield 1 and high yield 3? My answer is no, not unless you're stacking a lot of pen.
And that's why I think we do see the high yield ones outperform them. You know what I mean? Because that difference isn't made up there necessarily most of the time.
And I'm also looking at my logs, and I'm seeing cases where I'm getting 1 or 2 torps critting on high yields when I'm spamming them. Both high yield 1 and high yield 3. Yeah. I spend about half an hour one time with logs just firing high yield 3s and comparing them to high yield 1. So I'm cycling high yield 3, fire, high yield 1, fire, high yield 3, fire, high yield 1, fire, over and over and over and over again. And I'm seeing it with, you know, the low crit hit that I have, 1 torp critting or 2 torps critting versus, you know, having none of them crit, okay, high yield 3 wins, or all of them critting, high yield 3 wins, but depending on how much crit D I have at that time, it's either just barely or, okay, this is decent enough to warrant running high yield 3.
Yeah.
So for some builds, if you're stacking crit D and you're running Salvo torps, don't even bother with high yield 3.
Yeah, which is so right now, when I'm going in with my main torp and I'm going into ISA, I'm running high yield 1 and I'm running spread 3, and the spread 3 is usually just to help out where if I'm targeting the transformer, I need some torps to go out and get the generators to kind of help out there. So that's where my spread is. But I'm looking at my high yield 1 as my major damage output.
And you add on concentrate firepower to that, and so long as you get the procs, then yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
You're spamming high yield 1s all day.
And then seeing with the new trade I'm running, which I've been seeing even bigger. I mean, I'm seeing big max 1s, even on a build that's not necessarily built for that, with, you know, because of all the debuff on these targets at the same time between chemo and the trait beta, and then you put a high yield out on them. So
you're talking about the cold-hearted trait, correct?
Yes. Which is what we talked about a little last time in the show, but also in the last show. But again, this trait is working for a lot of different builds. And right now for torpedoes, I'm using it, and I'm seeing number increase, definitely.
Yeah, I need to see where I can actually add that to my repertoire, because if cold-hearted is doing that target debuff on there, then maybe with enough pen and debuffs on the target, a Delphic High Yield 3 could work better than a Delphic High Yield 1.
That's true.
Then we have to look at, you know, how many of those torps actually crit during that firing, and then where, you know, how much armor pen are you stacking already?
Yeah.
And for those who are real big number files, here's some, you know, I'll link the notes that I have in the sheets there. And if you're going through the numbers, by all means, please critique them, go over them, see what's going on there crazy. What if there's anything crazy on there, please point it out. Be more than happy to. Be happy to make any updates to it. Other than that, really, I mean, if you really want to put out some good hits constantly, and you're running low crit hit, high crit D, don't use high yield 3, not unless you have like a really big torp like the enhanced biomolecular or, you know, temporal disruption device, tricobalt, gravimetric, piezo or piezo, however you pronounce it. Sorry. Yeah. One of those big nasty one hitters. That's where you want to run a high yield 3. But if you're looking at something like, okay, do I want to put, you know, attack pattern beta or a high yield 3 on there, and you're running Salvo torps, run the beta and then run high yield 1 and just spam it all day long.
All right, so I want to thank Oden Knight for coming on here and sharing his wisdom. Literally the man I learned everything from. Thank you, Oden.
Thank you very much for having me on here, gentlemen.
It's always a pleasure.
And thank you, everybody, for listening to our second episode of STO Tech Trek. Stay tuned for more. Remember to comment and like and let us know if there's anything else you'd like to know about. Have a good one.